exiting the rear of the mannequin's Kevlar helmet. The round continued into the wall and furniture of the second room and passed completely through the structure. The M240G medium machine gun fired bursts of rounds against the test structure. A 10-round burst fired from straight on passed through the plywood exterior wall and then penetrated a bookcase and mannequins wearing fragmentation vests. The mannequins were knocked back 3 to 4 feet as some of the rounds continued into the second room, where they passed through a mannequin without armor before exiting through the rear wall of the structure. An M240 burst fired directly at the brick wall, made a 2-inch entry hole in the wall as the rounds ate their way through the brick and continued through the entire structure. Some rounds penetrated a wall locker and lodged in the rear wall. Any personnel in the line of fire would have incurred serious or lethal wounds. An M240 burst was fired directly at the cinder block wall. The rounds ate their way through the block, making a 2.5-inch entry hole in the wall. The rounds created secondary missiles from the back side of the block wall. Projectile fragments penetrated the neck of a mannequin wearing a fragmentation vest. Secondary missiles lodged in the rear wall of the first room. There was no penetration into the second room. Fired from an angle of 45 degrees, an M240 burst passed through the plywood wall and a mannequin with fragmentation vest. The rounds continued into the second room, where they exited the structure with a large dispersion pattern. Rounds from the M240 fired at the cinder block wall from 45 degrees passed through the exterior and interior walls to exit at the rear of the structure. Not all rounds of an M240 burst fired from 45 degrees were able to penetrate the brick exterior. One that did passed through a mannequin with a vest and continued into the second room, where it went through a desk organizer before exiting the structure through a rear wall. Bursts of M240 medium machine gun fire were able to penetrate all exterior walls and cause damage within the test structure. At a firing angle of 45 degrees, the brick exterior wall offered some resistance to penetration. The M2HB 50 caliber heavy machine gun was fired directly against the cinder block and brick walls. At 0 degrees, an M2HB burst went straight through the cinder block wall and everything beyond, leaving large holes in all the walls and causing severe damage to any object in its path. Another burst of M2HB rounds produced large holes in the brick wall, showering fragments into the first room. Projectile holes in the rear wall of the room indicated that the rounds were tumbling after penetrating the brick wall. The rounds continued through the entire structure, leaving large holes in the walls. At 45 degrees, an M2HB burst penetrated the block wall with similar results. The rounds passed through the first room, showering it with fragments. They went through the back two rooms, passing through anything in their path, leaving large holes in the walls and furniture before exiting the structure. A burst of M2HB rounds penetrated the brick wall, went through a mannequin with fragmentation vest, and showered fragments into the first room. The rounds and fragments passed through the second room, creating a large dispersion before exiting the rear wall of the structure. Bursts of M2HB 50 caliber fire at 0 and 45 degrees blasted through both brick and block facades and continued through the entire structure, leaving heavy damage in its wake. An M82 50 caliber special application scope rifle was also tested. A single round from the M82 fired directly at the plywood wall penetrated the wall and passed through a mannequin without fragmentation vest. The round ripped through the torso of the mannequin before exiting the rear of the structure. The fragmentation vest would have had little effect on the results due to the terminal effect of the projectile. The M203 40mm grenade launcher using an M433 high-explosive dual-purpose HEDP round was tested with direct shots against the three types of walls. An M203 round struck the plywood wall 4 feet from the bottom and created a 10 to 14-inch hole at the point of contact. Secondary fragments entered the front room. A single fragment, believed to be the small shape charge jet at the front of the fuse, passed through the entire structure. An M203 round penetrated the cinder block wall about 3 feet from the base. The shape-charged jet passed through the first room, entered the second room where it lodged in a metal desk. No secondary missiles were observed entering the room. The shape-charged jet and an M203 round penetrated the brick wall about 4 feet from the base, sending many secondary missiles into the front room. Fragments embedded themselves in the rear wall of the room. The M203, using M433 high-explosive dual-purpose HEDP rounds, penetrated all 3 facades, sending plywood and brick fragments into the rear wall of the first room. M67 high fragmentation grenades were placed in the structure and remotely detonated. An M67 grenade set off in the center of the front room blew out windows, pulled up the plywood floor, and peeled sheetrock walls away from their studs. All areas of the room were hit by fragments, with the mannequins receiving many hits. Fragments penetrated into the second room. This damage would have increased greatly had there been a roof to contain and concentrate the blast. A second grenade set off in a smaller rear room had a similar effect. The mannequins, one with a fragmentation vest and the other without, and furniture received a high number of hits. Some of the larger fragments penetrated the fragmentation vest, and more fragments penetrated areas not protected by the fragmentation vest. The mannequin without a vest received a high number of hits. Fragments impacting the mannequins could have been lethal, and again, a roof would have greatly intensified the blast. M67 grenades produced heavy damage in the test rooms, damage that would have been significantly increased had a roof contained the blast pressure. The Mark 44 30mm chain gun is the weapon of choice for the Marine Corps' advanced amphibious assault vehicle. Here, the gun is fired from 1,000 yards against an 8-inch double-reinforced concrete wall with plywood sidewalls. The room has target mannequins with body armor. Rounds detonated in the front wall, sending secondary missiles from the wall and round fragments into the room. Some fragments exited the rear wall of the structure. Against a brick and cinder block wall, the 30mm rounds detonated in the wall, sending secondary missiles from the wall into the room and fragments from the rounds through the rear wall. Fired against a bunker, multiple 30mm rounds penetrated through the bunker, destroying the impact point. The 30mm chain gun effectively penetrates reinforced concrete walls, combination brick and cinder block walls, and sandbag bunkers at ranges up to 1,000 yards. The SMAW is a man-portable 83mm rocket system for use against bunkers, urban targets, and light armor, with ranges up to 500 meters or about 540 yards. Here, SMAW is fired against a triple brick wall from 250 meters or about 270 yards. The warhead blows a 14-inch diameter hole in the wall and dispenses blast overpressure and secondary missiles from the brick into the area behind the wall. Fired against a tank, the small rocket puts a 10-inch diameter hole above the tracks, sending secondary missiles and blast overpressure inside, which could in turn cause secondary detonation of ammunition and fuel. Here, SMAW is fired against a sandbag bunker from 250 meters or about 270 yards. The bunker consisted of 6x6-inch timbers bolted together, with 2x2-inch timbers for the roof and covered with multiple layers of sandbags. The small warhead penetrates the sandbags and detonates against the timbers. The blast overpressure completely destroys the bunker. Different weapons and different types of structures will produce different results, but these limited tests show conclusively that both smaller and larger caliber weapons are able to penetrate urban-type walls and reach the personnel behind them. As Marines train to fight more effectively in cities, the most likely battlegrounds of the future, one of the most valuable lessons they can learn is that concealment does not equal cover.